Imagine you're a leader, responsible for guiding a group of people. Would you rather have them love you or fear you? This timeless question, posed by Niccolò Machiavelli in his famous book, The Prince, has fascinated thinkers for centuries. Machiavelli argued that fear is a more reliable tool for maintaining control, but love has its own power. Today, we'll explore this question and see why it still matters in leadership, politics, and even our personal relationships. Contextual background. Niccolò Machiavelli was a Renaissance philosopher and political thinker who lived over 500 years ago. He wrote The Prince as a guide for rulers to maintain power in uncertain times. Unlike other philosophers who focused on morality, Machiavelli believed that leaders should focus on practical strategies, even if they seem ruthless. His ideas were groundbreaking because they challenged the belief that rulers should always act virtuously. Instead, he asked, what truly works to keep people loyal and obedient? In The Prince, Machiavelli argued that fear is more dependable than love because it compels obedience through the threat of punishment. Love, on the other hand, is fickle and easily broken when self-interest gets in the way. This idea isn't just about rulers, it reveals deep truths about human behavior and how we interact with others. Niccolò Machiavelli was born on May 3, 1469, in Florence, Italy, during the Renaissance, a time of great cultural and political change. Florence was a bustling city-state known for its art, innovation, and political intrigue. Machiavelli grew up in a family that valued education, which helped him develop his sharp intellect and deep curiosity about politics and human behavior. His early life coincided with turbulent times in Italy, where city-states were constantly competing for power and survival. Machiavelli began his career as a diplomat for the Florentine Republic in 1498, after the Medici family lost control of Florence. As a government official, he traveled extensively across Europe, meeting rulers and observing their methods of governance. These experiences shaped his understanding of power and politics. One of his most notable achievements was organizing a citizen militia to defend Florence instead of relying on mercenaries. This decision proved successful during Florence's conflict with Pisa in 1509. However, Machiavelli's career came to an abrupt end in 1512 when the Medici family regained power in Florence with the help of Spanish forces. Accused of conspiring against the Medici, Machiavelli was arrested, tortured, and exiled to his estate outside Florence. Though this marked the end of his political career, it became the beginning of his legacy as a writer and philosopher. During his exile, Machiavelli wrote The Prince, a book that would define his reputation for centuries. Published posthumously in 1532, The Prince is a guide for rulers on how to gain and maintain power. Unlike other works of political philosophy that emphasized morality and virtue, Machiavelli focused on practicality and effectiveness. He argued that leaders should do whatever it takes to preserve their authority, even if it means acting immorally. One of the most famous questions posed in The Prince is it better to be feared or loved? Machiavelli believed that while being loved is desirable, it is unreliable because people are driven by self-interest. Fear, on the other hand, compels obedience through the threat of punishment. However, he cautioned that excessive fear could lead to hatred and rebellion. For Machiavelli, the ideal leader is someone who balances fear and love but prioritizes fear when necessary. Machiavelli's philosophy was shaped by his view of human nature. He believed that people are inherently selfish and unreliable when their personal interests are at stake. This perspective led him to advocate for leaders who are cunning, adaptable, and willing to use force or deception to achieve their goals. His concept of virtue, the ability to make bold decisions in uncertain times, remains one of his most influential ideas. Though the prince earned Machiavelli a reputation as a ruthless thinker, he was more complex than this single work suggests. He also wrote plays, poetry, and historical analyses that reveal his wit and creativity. His personal letters show a man who loved humor and conversation as much as he loved politics. In conclusion, Niccolò Machiavelli's life was marked by both triumphs and hardships. His experiences as a diplomat gave him unique insights into power dynamics, while his exile allowed him to reflect deeply on leadership and human behavior. The Prince remains one of the most influential works in political philosophy because it challenges us to think critically about what it takes to lead effectively. Machiavelli's ideas about leadership stem from his view of human nature. But what exactly did he believe about people? Are we truly so selfish that fear is the only way to control us? Niccolò Machiavelli's view of human nature is one of the most striking aspects of his philosophy. In The Prince, he describes people as fundamentally selfish, ambitious, and unreliable. For Machiavelli, these traits are not flaws to be corrected, but realities that leaders must understand and navigate. His realistic and often pessimistic perspective on human behavior shaped his advice to rulers, emphasizing the importance of fear as a tool for maintaining control. Machiavelli believed that humans are inherently self-centered. People prioritize their own interests above all else, focusing on their families, possessions, and ambitions while neglecting the needs of others. He argued that this selfishness leads individuals to act in ways that benefit themselves, even if it harms society or those around them. Machiavelli described humans as wretched creatures who are driven by greed and ego, making them unreliable allies in both personal relationships and governance. This selfishness also fuels competition among individuals. Machiavelli observed that people are constantly striving for more power, wealth, or influence, often at the expense of others. He compared this relentless ambition to the behavior of animals fighting for survival. In his view, human beings are naturally aggressive, and this tendency creates conflict and disorder within societies. Without strong leadership to enforce rules and maintain order, these competitive instincts could lead to chaos and anarchy. While love is often seen as a positive force that brings people together, Machiavelli viewed it as unreliable and conditional. Love depends on mutual obligation. Each person must feel that their needs are being met for the bond to remain strong. However, Machiavelli believed that people are quick to abandon love when circumstances change or when they see an opportunity for personal gain. 13. This idea is especially relevant in leadership. A ruler who relies solely on love risks losing loyalty during times of crisis or hardship. People may love their leader when things are going well, but turn against them when their own interests are threatened. Machiavelli warned rulers not to depend on love alone because it is easily broken by selfishness or fear of danger. 12. In contrast to love, fear is a far more dependable way to maintain control. Machiavelli argued that fear is rooted in self-preservation, a basic instinct that compels people to avoid pain or punishment. When people fear a ruler's authority, they are more likely to obey laws and follow orders because the consequences of disobedience are clear and immediate. 12. However, Machiavelli emphasized that fear must be carefully managed. If fear turns into hatred, it can lead to rebellion and instability. A wise ruler uses fear strategically, ensuring that punishments are fair and consistent rather than excessive or cruel. This balance allows leaders to maintain control without alienating their subjects entirely. Machiavelli's view of human nature has significant implications for leadership and governance. He believed that rulers must understand the selfishness and unpredictability of people in order to govern effectively. Leaders should not expect loyalty or gratitude from their subjects, but should instead focus on creating systems that compel obedience through fear or necessity. 12. This perspective challenges idealistic notions of morality in leadership. While many philosophers argue that rulers should act ethically and inspire love among their people, Machiavelli saw these approaches as impractical in the real world. He believed that leaders must prioritize stability and power over moral ideals, even if it requires deception or ruthlessness. 12. Machiavelli's view of human nature paints a dark picture of selfishness, ambition, and unreliability. He argued that love is too fragile to serve as the foundation for leadership, but that fear, when used wisely, can ensure stability and control. 12. These ideas challenge us to think critically about human behavior and the role of morality in governance. If fear is such a powerful tool for maintaining control, how can leaders use it effectively without turning their subjects into enemies? Now, let's explore Machiavelli's advice on balancing fear with respect while avoiding hatred, a delicate art every ruler must master. Niccolò Machiavelli's ideas about fear as a tool of governance are among his most famous and controversial contributions to political philosophy. In The Prince, he argues that fear is a more reliable way to maintain control than love. While love can inspire loyalty, it is fragile and dependent on circumstances. Fear, however, taps into the primal instinct of self-preservation, compelling people to obey because they dread punishment or consequences. For Machiavelli, this makes fear a powerful and dependable tool for rulers seeking stability and power. Machiavelli believed that human nature is inherently selfish and unpredictable. People act in their own interest and are quick to abandon their obligations when doing so benefits them. Because of this, relying on love alone is risky for any leader. Love depends on mutual respect and goodwill, but these feelings can change in an instant if people feel threatened or see an opportunity for personal gain. Fear, on the other hand, is not subject to the same instability. When people fear their leader, they are less likely to rebel because they understand the consequences of disobedience. However, Machiavelli did not advocate for cruelty or tyranny. He warned rulers against using excessive fear, as it could lead to hatred and eventual rebellion. A ruler who governs through sheer terror risks alienating their subjects entirely, creating instability instead of order. Instead, Machiavelli advised leaders to use fear strategically, enough to command respect and obedience, but not so much that it turns into hatred. For example, he recommended that punishments be swift and fair, targeting only those who break the rules rather than punishing entire populations indiscriminately. One of Machiavelli's most famous passages highlights this balance. It has to be noted that men must be either pampered or crushed because they can get revenge for small injuries but not for grievous ones. This means that a ruler must act decisively when dealing with dissent or rebellion, either by eliminating the threat entirely or by addressing it in a way that prevents further retaliation. By instilling fear through decisive action, a ruler can deter future challenges to their authority. Machiavelli also emphasized that fear should be paired with legitimacy. A ruler who governs solely through fear risks losing the trust and consent of their people over time. To maintain long-term stability, leaders must ensure that their actions are perceived as justifiable and necessary, rather than arbitrary or cruel. This requires careful judgment and prudence, qualities that Machiavelli believed were essential for effective leadership. The idea of using fear in governance has had lasting influence beyond politics. In business management, for example, some leaders adopt fear-based strategies to ensure productivity and compliance among employees. While this approach can yield short-term results, it often creates resentment and reduces morale over time. Echoing Machiavelli's warning about the dangers of excessive fear. Ultimately, Machiavelli's advice on fear reflects his pragmatic approach to leadership. He understood that rulers cannot rely solely on love or morality to maintain control in a world where human behavior is driven by self-interest and ambition. Fear provides a practical solution for ensuring obedience and stability, but it must be used wisely to avoid backlash. Fear may be powerful, but Machiavelli also recognized its limitations. What happens when fear turns into hatred? And is there a way to balance fear with other emotions like admiration or hope? Niccolò Machiavelli's discussion of love in leadership offers a fascinating contrast to his views on fear. While he famously argued that fear is more reliable for maintaining control, he did not dismiss the value of love entirely. In The Prince, Machiavelli acknowledges that being loved by one's subjects can be advantageous as it fosters loyalty and goodwill. However, he warns that love is fragile and conditional, making it an unreliable foundation for leadership when compared to fear. Machiavelli believed that love depends on mutual obligation. People love their leaders when they feel cared for, respected, and secure. This emotional connection can inspire loyalty and motivate individuals to follow their leader willingly. Leaders who are loved often enjoy the benefits of trust and admiration, which can make governing easier in times of peace and prosperity. However, Machiavelli pointed out that love is easily broken when circumstances change. If people's needs are not met or their personal interests are threatened, their loyalty can quickly disappear. This fragility of love stems from human nature itself. Machiavelli viewed people as inherently selfish and driven by their own ambitions. While they may express affection for their leader during good times, This affection is conditional. It exists only as long as the leader continues to benefit them. When faced with hardship or danger, people are more likely to prioritize their own survival over their loyalty to a leader they once loved. This makes love a risky tool for rulers who need to maintain stability during crises. Machiavelli's skepticism about the reliability of love in leadership is rooted in his realistic approach to politics. He understood that emotions like love are unpredictable and subject to change based on external circumstances. For example, a ruler who relies on love alone might find themselves abandoned by their subjects during times of war or economic hardship because people act in their own self-interest when faced with adversity. Despite these limitations, Machiavelli did not completely dismiss the role of love in leadership. He recognized that being loved can enhance a ruler's reputation and make governing easier under certain conditions. Leaders who inspire affection among their people are often seen as charismatic and trustworthy, qualities that can help them gain support and maintain order without resorting to force. However, Machiavelli emphasized that love should never be the sole foundation of leadership. It must be balanced with other tools like fear and respect. One key advantage of love is its ability to unite people around a common goal or vision. Leaders who are loved can foster a sense of community and shared purpose among their subjects, encouraging cooperation and reducing conflict. This type of leadership is particularly effective in democratic or collaborative environments where mutual trust and goodwill are essential for success. However, Machiavelli cautioned against relying too heavily on love because it leaves leaders vulnerable during times of crisis. A ruler who depends solely on affection may struggle to enforce discipline or make tough decisions when faced with rebellion or external threats. In such situations, fear becomes a more effective tool for maintaining control because it compels obedience through the threat of punishment. Ultimately, Machiavelli believed that successful leaders must strike a balance between fear and love. While being loved can enhance a ruler's reputation and foster loyalty during good times, fear provides a more reliable means of ensuring stability during challenges. By combining these two approaches strategically, leaders can create an environment where people respect them enough to obey while still feeling connected enough to support them willingly. Hook for next chapter. If balancing fear and love is the key to effective leadership, how does one ensure that fear doesn't turn into hatred? Niccolò Machiavelli's ideas about fear and love have found their way into modern leadership, politics, and even business management. His famous question, "Is it better to be feared or loved?" remains relevant today because it addresses the core of how leaders interact with people. While Machiavelli argued that fear is more reliable than love for maintaining control, he also acknowledged the risks of relying too heavily on fear. In modern times, leaders across various fields have applied these concepts in different ways, balancing fear and love to achieve their goals. In politics, Machiavelli's ideas are often used to explain the behavior of authoritarian regimes. Leaders who prioritize fear tend to enforce strict laws and punishments to maintain order. For example, some governments use surveillance and harsh penalties to deter dissent and ensure compliance. While this approach can create stability, it often leads to resentment among the people. Machiavelli warned that excessive fear could turn into hatred, which might eventually lead to rebellion. Modern political leaders must therefore strike a balance, using fear to maintain authority while avoiding actions that alienate their citizens. On the other hand, democratic leaders often rely on love to inspire loyalty and unity. They focus on building trust and goodwill among their constituents by addressing their needs and fostering a sense of community. Leaders who are loved tend to gain support during peaceful times because people feel connected to them emotionally. However, as Machiavelli pointed out, love can be fragile. When crises arise or when people's self-interest takes precedence, the loyalty inspired by love may weaken. This is why even democratic leaders sometimes use elements of fear, such as warnings about threats or consequences, to motivate action. In business management, Machiavelli's ideas have influenced how bosses interact with employees. Fear-based leadership involves setting strict rules and using penalties for poor performance or misconduct. This approach can ensure productivity in the short term because employees are motivated by the desire to avoid punishment. However, it often creates a stressful work environment that reduces morale and creativity over time. Machiavelli's warning about hatred applies here as well. Employees who feel overly controlled may eventually resent their leader and disengage from their work. Conversely, love-based leadership in business focuses on building relationships with employees through trust, encouragement, and support. Leaders who are loved by their teams often create collaborative environments where innovation thrives. Employees feel valued and motivated to contribute because they trust their leader's intentions. Yet, as Machiavelli noted, love alone is not always enough. During tough times, such as financial crises or major changes, leaders may need to use fear strategically to enforce discipline or ensure compliance. Niccolò Machiavelli's ideas about leadership have been both praised and criticized for centuries. One of the most significant ethical critiques of his philosophy is that it seems to advocate for an amoral or immoral approach to politics. Machiavelli argued that leaders should prioritize the preservation and expansion of their power and the stability of the state above all else, even if it means using deception, manipulation, or cruelty. 3. This emphasis on the ends justifying the means has led many to question whether his approach is ethical. However, a closer examination of Machiavelli's work reveals a more nuanced perspective. He did not reject morality outright, but rather recognized that leaders often face difficult choices where no option is entirely good. In such situations, Machiavelli advised choosing the lesser of two evils, a decision that requires careful consideration of the consequences. 1. This pragmatic approach to ethics acknowledges that real-world politics often involves moral dilemmas where leaders must balance competing interests and values. One of the key criticisms of Machiavelli's philosophy is its focus on authoritarianism and the potential for abuse of power. His emphasis on the need for a strong central authority to maintain stability and security has been criticized for potentially justifying oppressive regimes. 3. Critics argue that his theories can be used to legitimize autocratic rule, where the ruler's power is unchecked and citizens have limited rights. Despite these criticisms, Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of avoiding actions that cause hatred among the people. He advised leaders to refrain from harming citizens' property or families, as these actions can lead to resentment and rebellion. 1. This approach suggests that Machiavelli was not entirely dismissive of moral considerations, but rather sought to balance them with the practical realities of governance. Another aspect of Machiavelli's philosophy that has been overlooked is his discussion of hope as a complementary force to fear. While fear can ensure obedience, hope can inspire loyalty and motivation. Leaders who offer their people a vision of a better future can foster a sense of optimism and cooperation, which can be more powerful than fear alone. This balance between fear and hope allows leaders to maintain control while also building a positive relationship with their subjects. In modern times, balancing fear with hope is crucial for effective leadership. Leaders who focus solely on fear risk creating resentment and rebellion, while those who inspire hope can build lasting loyalty. This balance requires leaders to be adaptable and responsive to the needs of their people, using fear strategically when necessary, but also fostering a sense of shared purpose and optimism. Ultimately, Machiavelli's ideas challenge us to think critically about leadership and ethics. While his emphasis on pragmatism and power can be controversial, it also reflects a realistic understanding of the complexities of governance. By considering both the ethical critiques and the potential benefits of balancing fear with hope, we can develop a more nuanced view of leadership that acknowledges the challenges of real-world politics. Niccolò Machiavelli's timeless question, "Is it better to be feared or loved?" captures the complexity of leadership and human behavior. Throughout this exploration, we've seen how fear offers stability and control, compelling obedience through self-preservation. However, it comes with risks. If mismanaged, fear can turn into hatred, leading to rebellion and instability. On the other hand, love fosters loyalty and goodwill, creating emotional bonds between leaders and their people. Yet, love is inherently unstable, often fading when self-interest takes precedence or circumstances change. Machiavelli challenges us to think critically about these dynamics. His philosophy suggests that the ideal leader balances fear and love, using both strategically to maintain authority without alienating their subjects. This balance is not just relevant to rulers, but also applies to modern leadership in politics, business, and personal relationships. Leaders today must navigate these forces carefully, ensuring they inspire trust and admiration while maintaining respect and discipline. As we close, consider these questions. Can leaders truly balance fear and love in today's complex world? How do these dynamics shape our personal lives and interactions with others? Machiavelli's insights remind us that leadership is as much about understanding human nature as it is about wielding power. Machiavelli's question remains timeless because it reflects the delicate art of leadership and relationships. As you reflect on this balance, ask yourself, what would you choose, fear or love?